Well, hello, this is Peter Combs from Bitamount.com and P.O. Combs Asian Art in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And today is March 19th, 2020, and while all that's going on in the world with this horrible virus that's spreading around and we're all sort of stuck in limbo, I thought it would be fun for people who are collectors and dealers to take a little trip, and you can do it from home. This is we're going to go through and take a look at the National Palace Museum collection in Taipei over in Taiwan. It's an extraordinary collection, and a lot of the images are online, as you know, but we went through and wove into this video their virtual tour elements and did some editing and created a video out of it. I think you'll enjoy it. It's fairly long, but there's a lot of good content, and we just wanted to do this for the fun of it. Okay, see you in a couple of seconds. And if you decide to take one of the tours that are linked off the homepage over at Bitamount.com under the National Palace Museum block there in yellow, you can get something like this. And when you take the tour, if you do the automated tours, it'll bring you to objects, and when they do, you click on the little blue box that's above above particular pieces, and it'll pull it up for you. And there's even a voice narration that they provide. It's quite excellent, actually. And in this case, they're showing us a Tang Dynasty female figure. These would have been burial figures. That's what they were made for. This is a large one. It's 75 centimeters tall, so it's 2.5 feet tall, beautifully done. And the emphasis on these pieces were the Tang were always emphasized elaborate funeral measures, and they buried them with lots of pottery, and in this case, a female attendant to look after the deceased in the afterlife and so forth. And they've done a superb job photographing this thing. It's just amazing. And the quality of the pottery really comes through. The little peach-formed mouth, the very curvilinear areas around the eyes, long attenuated brows and lashes, and so forth. The face is perfectly round. And the features were considered at the time to be the ideal qualities of feminine beauty in the Tang court. And the women were depicted as being quite stout. Here you see it. And this was considered to be optimal. This was the best way a woman should look, they thought. Healthy and robust, full of a well-fed diet. All right? And casual and relaxed manner reveals a sense of stately and a sort of self-assured ease. Very elaborate hairdo and descending strands that encircle her cheeks and so forth. There's a beautiful example. And this was the natural appearance that they shot for with the noble women of the Tang court. And now we're going to move down the hallway and take a look at a few other things. And the other thing I meant to mention was that if you come to a section that has a little video clip above it, like right here, you can enlarge it, and they have a person there. Not only is she narrating, but she's in the scene, and they have some very good photography to accompany these videos. This is a National Palace Museum video. You just click on it, click it open, and sit back and relax.
In front of you is the famous Santai pottery figurine from the Tang Dynasty. A young lady wearing a fashionable short-sleeve over vest, likely imported from Persia. She's sitting on a foreign breed horse in a colorful saddle. Her body turns slightly to the right while looking down. One hand grabbed onto the strap while the other extends out. Likely once held a long wooden mallet to strike the ball. From these, we know she's playing a mounted ball game, similar to the polo game we know today. Chinese polo was in fact the most popular sport during Tang Dynasty, where many of the emperors were active players themselves and became an important leisure activity of the upper class, including the court ladies. The word Santai literally means tricolor, having amber, green, and cream white as the three primary colors. It's a lead-based, low-fire glazing earthenware that gives an exuberant effect after firing, gained popularity and fame during the Tang Dynasty, reflecting the artistic taste of the time. Tang Santai are also highly associated with tomb figures, giving its high burial culture, which also reflects the lives of the living. This ceramic artifact is not only a work of art, but also gives us a glimpse over the golden age of China.
And if you move just across the hall, just across from this case on the left, you're going to find another piece of really interesting Tang porcelain. It's a form of whiteware, and it's in this case here. And if you click it open, you're going to get this. And there it is. And these flasks were created in the Qing kilns for nomads primarily, and they were based originally on metal examples and pieces made from leather. And nomadic tribes carried them, and a loop would go through, a string would be tied in through here and here for carrying purposes. And they were made in huge quantities, but this particular one is very fine. Some were not nearly as fine, obviously, and it was good enough to make its way into the Palace Museum. And if you click it open, there it is, and you can pull it up and get a really close look at the glaze on this, which is very creamy white, very silver. And these were referred to sometimes as silver silver glazes or snow white, and because of the color. This was the first time they made sumptuously white porcelains, and here it all is. And this is a very fine piece, and you can see the slight pinch that was formed when the slight lobe that was put into it while it was formed. And the mouth is nicely shaped, beautifully shaped, and flares out just slightly. And you can pop over here and hold on a second. There it is. And here's a picture of the foot rim of it. And the bottom of these were quite simple. They were slightly recessed. And as you can see on the bottom of this, the slant of the foot here comes down a little into the middle. It tapers into the base and then is glazed. And you have a few minor glaze imperfections here, a firing gap, and there's some kiln gunk on here from when they fired it. That's not a failing of the glazer. It was just something touched it while it was being fired, probably, and caused that slight discoloration. But this is a really, really fine example, no matter how you look at it. And if you just go next to it, there's a 5 Dynasty Celadon here. This is a beautiful thing, nicely glazed, perfectly done with a flattened outer rim, as you can see here, and it's a very, very nice sort of almost like a light sage color Celadon, very attractive. And these were made for members of the royal family in the Wuyu kingdom, which are often hold at least one Celadon water containers as grave goods, and they would bury people with these sometimes. And if you flip it over, flip up this picture here, you can get a good look at the glaze. This is the greatest part of this site, is that they really did a good job providing enlargeable images, which is crucial to understand these things. But you'll see how fine this was done. And these were done during the 5 dynasties, starting in 907 toward the end of the Tang Dynasty itself. And if you flipped it over, that's what the bottom of this looks like. It's quite unusual. Most Chinese bowls, as you know, have very noticeable foot rims, and this particular type of bowl often doesn't. It has a very, very shallow, very narrow foot, very delicately made. This was quite a trick, actually, when you think about it. And the bottom is sort of scooped out. It's very even, sort of tapers in and tapers back out, and you can see little bits of firing imperfections from where the piece was sitting while it was being fired. And you look up here, you'll see some minor imperfections in the glaze, or these discoloration caused by the interior paste of the piece. And here you can see the lip of the rim, how the top of it is flat, but the bottom of it you can see is quite rolled over and rounded and very, very neatly trimmed. All right, and that's it for this. And now we're going to move down the hallway to another section. And the next gallery over is this. It's an extremely rare Northern Sung white glazed child form pillow. And you've all seen these before, but in images, and they turn up, of course, in the fake market all the time. But the important thing to remember here is that there are only 3 of these known in the entire world. And I believe that 2 out of the 3 are in private or in public museums. So if you come across one, you can pretty quickly disregard it as being authentic. These were interesting pieces, though. They were about a foot long, maybe a little over, and often were made in components. The head and the other end of the body are made separately, and then the face is carved afterwards once it's assembled, and then glazed. And the glaze, again, from the Tang Dynasty, white glazes became very popular and the ding kilns accelerated at them at making these. And if you blow the thing up, you get a good look at the glaze. And you'll notice that there are areas of greenish yellow toning here and here and along the edges. It's not unusual. And here's a picture of the face. The details of the face are really quite extraordinary. They're beautifully done. They look very childlike and very angelic, quite charming. But notice all of the detail that went into it, including the plinth upon which the child is laying down. Just beautifully done. And if you pop back over to the original images, you can scroll down, and here on the bottom, as was not unusual, the Qianlong emperor loved this piece, and he had an inscription and poem added to the bottom during the 18th century, which this was sort of a common practice that you're going to see throughout Chinese porcelain and painting history. The Qianlong emperor in particular was a fan of the arts, so he often would add his stamp to paintings. He would add poems to porcelain. He would add poems to paintings and colophons and things just to express his admiration of them. And you can see on the bottom here are two little vent holes, which you will find. And it's interesting, this piece, apparently, if you pick it up and move it a little bit, you won't be able to do it if you go to the museum, obviously. But there's some loose clay inside because it is hollow, and it rattles around inside the body. So it's an interesting example, and extremely rare, but beautifully done. Just a beautiful example. And now we're going to mosey down to another section of the museum. And in this gallery, we're going to take a look at a couple of pieces of Sung to Yuan ware examples. And one of them is this piece right here. And it's probably, as far as ceramics goes in the Palace Museum, the rarest and certainly the most valuable thing, I think, in their ceramics category. And it's this. It's an unbelievably fine example of Northern Sung Ru ware. And as we all know, Ru ware examples themselves are very rare. Some museums are lucky just to have a broken piece of it. This example is in perfect condition, and it is an absolutely superb piece. And if you look at it carefully, you can see that we're going to get to some enlargements in a second. You'll see how even and fine and absolutely perfect the glaze is all the way around. This was made as a narcissus basin. That's what they call them. They're not terribly large. They tend to be just a few inches long. This one is about 7 or 8 inches in length. And you can see on the bottom here an inscription, and we're going to get to that in a second, because this is another inscription added by the Qianlong emperor, and it also had belonged to his father, Yongzheng, before he got his hands on it, and put his inscription on the piece. And we get over here, and here it is. Here's the piece. And if you look very carefully at the way the ru head foot rim is attached, you'll see how smooth and absolutely perfect and this beautiful bluish glaze they were able to attain at times in the imperial kilns. These were made for the court. These were very, very, very fine. And anything that wasn't perfect that was made in the imperial kilns, they were thrown away. They were dumped, and they found the dump site of these, and there's a number of shards laying around and so forth. But here it is, and you can see on the foot rim here on the edge of it where the glaze pulls back just a little bit. Right here, and reveals a slight discoloration from the interior porcelain. All right, and then we flip it over, and you get to the back of it, and here's the inscription. And what I love about this photograph is that it really shows the glaze because of the reflection of the light. And if you pull it in and enlarge it a bit, you get a real sense of just how superbly made these were for Sung pieces. And here's Qianlong's inscription. Here is his mark right there, and you see these little spots. All right, these pieces had glazed feet. You'll notice that the feet on these are glazed, and the way they could glaze them would be that they put these little tiny pilings basically underneath the piece to work as supports. And they would allow you to dip the piece entirely in glaze. They would have these little pilings already applied. They would put it in the kiln, fire it, and that way the foot rims would be perfectly smooth and glazed, wouldn't scratch any surfaces. And then they would just snap the seeds, these little seed-like, leaving these seed-like things behind when they took the little pilings off upon which this piece rested during its firing. So it was quite a technique and very innovative for the time. This was quite a trick. Just excellent, excellent thing. And then we're going to move along just a little bit further down we're going to get to this piece here, a really fine hibiscus-shaped light blue and green glazed Guan ware, Southern Sung, 12th to 13th century. This is one of the best ones in the world, of course, superbly glazed, beautifully shaped. They provided a dandy photograph of the bottom. And you notice that this washer is very smoothly finished on the interior, and it has a very interesting glaze to it. And if you come down here, again, to the MPM selections, whenever you see that, you can enlarge the picture and get a good look at it. And here it is. And here's that hibiscus brush washer, or hibiscus washer. And you notice the crackle on these are, interestingly, they tend to look like almost like hairs. They're very elongated. And they connect and intersect, and they move around randomly the way crackles do. And on the edge, you can see where the glaze pulled a bit thin, and the piece becomes slightly whiter in tone. But overall, the glazing on this was just absolutely over the top. A fantastic example. And you can take a look at the bottom of it here. There it is. And you can see it's fully glazed down to the inside, and those hair-like crackles also appear on the interior, and where the foot is on this, it goes to this sort of brownish tone, which is the underlying clay being revealed. Just an exceptional example. Extremely smooth, very glossy, and again, the tone of the glaze is pretty much perfect. Just an excellent example. And then on the next case over to it is this. This is a really great piece of ware made during the Yuan Dynasty. We're moving up in period. We started out in the Tang, and we're going to move up through the Qing Dynasty all the way up to, we'll have some Guangxu examples coming along and Kangxi in a minute. But I wanted to look at this. This is a fantastic stem cup. And these were used in the Yuan Dynasty for ritual purposes. The paintings were done where they often depict figures holding these with fruit in them or other foods. And the glaze on these are quite exceptional. Iron and gold thread glaze. And if you pull in the enlargement that they make available, here it is. And right here in the middle, you see this yellow line. That's you have iron and gold. The black threads are the iron lines, and then you have these very occasional gold threads. Some examples have more gold threads in them than others. It depends on the piece. But this is an incredibly fine example where the glaze came off just perfectly. It has a slightly yellowish green tone to the interior. The outside is slightly lighter. And but beautifully potted, and there's a good image of the foot rim where you can see that the pottery pushing through with its iron content, causing this brownish oxidization that occurs in the firing. But the pattern of the crackle is very attractive. The very thin rim that's slightly outverted and everted out. Just a great thing. Love this stem cup, and these are unbelievably rare as well. They do turn up in auctions all the time, but you can ignore them. You're not going to find one in an auction anywhere in America outside of one of the big auction houses. All right, and now we're going to move along down the hall to another section. So just hold on a second. And further down this hallway, in the same gallery on the right, you're going to come across a number of great rarities in the museum. One of them is this, and everybody will recognize it if you've been collecting for any length of time. The famous Qianhua chicken cups, a similar example from this period, sold at auction a few years ago for about $35 million. A massive amount of money for a small cup, but an incredibly rare example and with enormous significance to the Chinese people. It depicts a rooster and a hen with chicks, which are symbolic of the Chinese court, the emperor being the rooster, of course, the hen being the empress, and the chicks representing the people of China for whom they were responsible. And it was all depicted very nicely in this Daosai example. And in this set of images, they do provide some fantastic photographs that you can pull in and get a good look at the example. And this is one of them. Here it is. Here's the cup. And here you can see very clearly the underglazed Daosai decoration. And then you can see the overglaze red that was applied later to highlight and outline the wings of the birds and so forth. Quite exceptional. And at the bottom, you can see a small fledgling chick walking along with the hen and the rooster looking down at it to keep an eye on it to make sure it's okay. And then on the next series, there's several good images, but this is fantastic. You don't see these pictures very often of the bottoms of these showing the full bottom. Often they just show the rain mark, and you can blow it up nicely. Here it is. Center it, and there's the foot rim. You can see that the glaze has a slightly yellowish tone to it where it meets the unglazed paste. It's a little irregular going around there, and a slightly amber color. And there's the mark, and you can see the touch marks where the artist applied his brush, went around, took it off, put it back down, and there's the mark. And notice the mark is very much up against the walls of this double box that it was placed in, touching it here and at the top and at the bottom. In the copies, they always seem to mess that up. There are a lot of fakes of these roaming around. As I said, there are 5, I think, or 6 of these known in the entire world, and all but one, I suspect, is in a museum at this point. But a really great example, and beautiful, beautiful porcelain done during the Qianlong reign in the 1460s to 1487, very, very early. And next to it over here, we're going to hop to this one first, is this, the 100 Deer Wucai enameled Ming Dynasty vase. This comes from the Wanli period. And I wanted to show this for a couple of reasons. One, this is the only example they have in the museum. These originals of these are extraordinarily rare, of the 100 deer jars. There was one that came up at auction in England a number of years ago, brought a lot of money, and the fakes turn up everywhere. These are turning up everywhere because a lot of the fakers, what they're doing is basically in the market, they go to the Palace Museum and look at and take pictures of things that are in the museum and then go out and replicate them. And this is one that's been replicated over and over and over and over. I think last month I saw 5 of these being auctioned in the United States, and none of them were authentic, not one of them. And here's a great shot of the bottom. And we can hop over here and get a very good look at this jar. And I urge you to do it if you enjoy learning about how these ceramics were enameled. Wu Cai, Wu means literally 5 colors. And they aren't always, it's not always any particular color. There's no absolute rule on it. But typically they include reddish browns, yellows, as you can see here, blue, greens, and aubergine and so forth. And what's very lovely about this is that you notice how neatly all of the underglazed blue areas are outlined and then very gently colored in, very precisely colored in with a lighter blue. And here you can see some of the underglazed blue on the deer. It has little tiny dots making him a spotted deer. And then you also see very similar outlining and careful infilling of the deer in other colors, in the polychrome colors. And you can scroll down it and go right down to the bottom, and there's that sort of wave pattern at the bottom, and so forth. And if you pop over here, here's a picture of the bottom. And just click it in the middle and pull it in. And there's the bottom of a Wanli jar. That's what these look like. They left an area in the base, which is, the bottom is concave. And then where the rain mark is further additionally carved out and concave within that. The bases of these are quite thick. These have thick bottoms in them, so they can do this. And if you look, you notice there's that very nice iron oxide line running around it. And there's other areas, small areas of iron oxide. But you can see the handwork that went into making this, and you can see the foot rim here where it's smooth and very, very white. And that is because that's where it sits. That's where it's touching tabletops or when it's on display in its case. And you can see that it's over the centuries worn fairly smooth. And if you turn the piece on its side and pull it up, that's what the bottom of it looks again. It looks like, again, very nicely done. You can see the trim lines where they trimmed it around the edge, the slight shatter area. And again, this very nice iron oxide line. And in a couple of places, you can see where the iron oxide actually pulled through the white glaze over it. All right, but there's the paste, nice and pure. You don't see a lot of junk in there from the firing because the clay they used was quite well levigated and cleaned. They were very careful about washing their clay in the Ming Dynasty to make sure that the body didn't become discolored during the firing. And there it is upside down on its top. But a really lovely example and something that you're not going to find in a local auction. You're not going to see them. You simply aren't. But it's worth learning about Wu Cai glazes by examining this piece because other examples of Wu Cai obviously turn up on the market and are fairly buyable. But these big jars, these big wine jars, are not that common at all. There's just a handful of them. And let's move on now. We're going to take a look at a very amazing Yongle period bottle vase. And we'll close this window, and here it is. And there are a few of these around. They're also made in the Ming Dynasty. They're from the Yongle reign, 1403 to 1424. And here's a good image of the dragon, the classic Ming dragon so almost cartoonish looking, with the bulging eyes and the ferocious teeth with his tongue sticking out. And you see the upper vine pattern around the top, flanked by double lines. And you go down, here's the back of the animal with 3 claws. Notice it only has 3 claws, not 5. People out there always go by claws. This was obviously an imperial kiln object, but very, very rare. What's interesting is that there are 2 of these that have been in the Middle East at the Topkapi Museum, and what's the other one? I can't remember. The Artable Shrine in Iran has one. And they're quite proud of them, obviously. And these were given as tribute to that court by the Ming emperors as part of trade. These were considered to be fantastic gifts at the time, and very symbolic of the Chinese court. That's why the dragon is on there. They want the Middle Easterners to know that they have an emperor, and that this piece symbolizes that emperor. And beautifully done. And now we're going to move around, and we're going to head into another section. In this section of the museum, it's known as Gallery 205. All of the galleries here are numbered 201, 205. This is 205, and this is where a lot of the Qing examples are located. And we're going to look at 3 of them. We're going to start with this really elegantly done tea caddy or tea jar. It's roughly, it's about 7 inches tall. It was made during the Qing reign. And as you can see, the iron red ground decoration with a lot of gilding over it. It's very, very perfectly done. Here it is with the lid off of it. And there's a whole very good image of the foot rim on the bottom with the rain mark being included. And there's the height of it, 16 centimeters. So it's about 7 inches tall, roughly. All right, and if you look closely at the decoration of the lid, the vessel symbolizes the notion of, and it's described in the description, underneath each of these, 10,000 Yuan, blessings forever, and it's in the regulated scrolling patterns of the lotus blossoms among the stems and leaves are linked together, and the symbol of 10,000 and that for blessings in the center of the lotus blossom represent the idea of everlasting good fortune. So there's a lot of good material on here, but we want to focus and zoom in and take a good look at this ceramic, because this porcelain is so beautifully done. And we're going to hop over. Here it is. And if you enlarge this by using the available images, you can see the glaze is absolutely perfectly done. The roux heads are very, very tidy. And you see the characters inside the lotus blossoms that we just described. And here's the base and the lid to the right. All right, and these are not big jars. In the photographs, they always look big, but don't be surprised if they're 5 or 6 or 7 inches tall, 8 inches tall. All right, and there it is, and you can see that the underside has a slightly bluish tinge to it. Okay, and that is this example. It's just an exceptional jar from the Qing period. And Qing was the son of the Qianlong emperor. And a lot of the porcelains that were made in the Qing period were really just carried forward because that was the taste at the time. So Qing pieces, if they're not marked, can often be confused for Qianlong pieces because of the quality. And so forth. The later in the Qing period, the quality slid a little bit, but we're still very, very good. And if you step across the hall, over to here is this Qianlong vase. And this is a really rare example. These were known as revolving vases. And these were made in 2 parts and then fitted together. And inside the walls here, you can see there's a fish. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But in a second, I want to just talk about the ground, the beautiful deep cobalt blue ground that they were able to do during the Qianlong period. Very dense, very strong, and very fine gilding. Gilding was a very big part of their decorative palette. And this vase, again, is not a great big vase. It is only 23 centimeters, so it's about about 7 inches tall. Now, these were not big pieces, but what was really interesting about these is if you were to have one, the emperor thought these were great fun. They were very amused by them, and where the notion came from to make revolving vases, no one's really quite certain. There's a theory that it has to do with the importation and use of children's tops, which spin. And if you blow this piece up and you look at it here, how it would work is simply this. You see this line here. This is a separate section. This is the upper section that's fitted into the lower section. And this fish is attached to this. Okay, so it slides down inside the pot. And when you turn it, a series of fish go by, and it looks as though they were swimming. They're swimming past you in each scene. So a fish goes by, and then another fish, and another fish. And it was considered to be very amusing. And you notice they applied these loop handles that became popular when they made vases to be used as water jugs. Clearly this wasn't going to be used to hold water, but they applied the handles anyway, very much like they did in the Tang Dynasty, as we saw earlier on that whiteware, because it was supposed to hold water. And these are just sort of vestigial, holdbacks to add to the decoration. But there was never going to be, no one was ever going to put water in this and sling it over their shoulder. And what's lovely about these images is that if you click on it and blow it up, you get a very fine, detailed shot of the fish, for example, on the interior. And you can see the edges if you look down in the lower right here. You can see where there's been little bits of wear and things over the centuries since it was made. And you can also see that there were little bubbles in the glaze. If you look over here where the mouse is, you see these little areas of bubble. And that is just air that came out of the glaze while it was being fired. And up here you see them, even more of them, these little white dots. And that's just the underlying body reaction to bubbles coming out of it. But a beautiful, beautiful example. And the emperor was very fond of these. And none of them were big, as I said. They didn't make great big, none of these are 20 or 30 inches tall. These tended to be quite small, very personal. And the emperor just loved having them. And it was very much a Qianlong invention. A few were made after that, but most of the great ones were during the Qianlong period. All right, and then we're going to slip over here to this, a very, very fine, a really beautiful. This is a Guangxu jar, Guangxu vase. It's fairly large. This thing, I want to get the measurement right on this, 51 centimeters. This was a fairly large vase, about 18, 19 inches tall, but done in it's done in the form of a flower. Okay, the shape of it, this very curvilinear form. And centered with a dragon in relief work, greeting a carp coming up out of the water. And we'll scroll down. It has mask handles on the end. And on the bottom is a very nice flattened foot, pure white, with an inscribed 6-character Guangxu rain mark added to it. And if we hop over and do the enlargement that's available for this, you will see a great deal more detail. Here it is. And there's a nice close shot of it. This particular color green became sort of popular in the Guangxu period. It was very clear, very crisp, very bright. And this piece almost looks modern. It is so well done. It's so superbly well done. It's incredible. And the dragon is all in relief work with every scale on his back finely detailed. I think there's a better image. There it is. There it is. And you can see here how they did the dragon scales, all carefully cut and trimmed, and then they carefully cut out the clouds around it. And you look at there's the dragon's face, that sort of alarmed look that they were famous for. And his eyes are wide open. And why is his eyes are wide open? Because he's approaching this carp that's coming up out of the water to meet him. And just beautifully done. And here it is. Okay, and there's the 5 claws. And again, these very fine raised sort of stipple ground is repeated, but flawlessly glazed. This piece is really flawlessly glazed, spectacular all the way around. And here's a detailed shot of the ring handle, the mask handle on the end. It's interesting because the mask handle is nicely done, but it's not as finely done as the dragon. And the reason is this was applied later. It was made and then applied onto the piece, but is not of the same quality as the dragon. And I found that sort of curious, but that's how some of these are. And here it is again, okay? And these are the 3 Qing examples that we're going to take a look at. And in a minute, we're going to look at another piece that's particularly fine. And now on to this really fine ruby. They describe it as ruby red. It's actually redder than it looks in the photographs they took for some reason. It looks pretty red here. Is this Xuande period monk's cap ewer. And these were quite exceptional, and they were very rare at the time. They were done in as you can see, the Xuande period was a very short reign, 1426 to 1435. And these were modeled after the caps. They were called monk's caps ewers because they were modeled after the caps that were seen in paintings done of Tang Dynasty monks. And the top is stepped down, and you see this beautifully done flattened handle with roux heads on each end of it. And you'll also notice that the glaze on these, they have this white trimming, which is very, very much favored by collectors. And this is caused during the firing process when the glaze contracts a little bit and it pulls back on the edges and reveals this white underside. There it is, and here's the interior. And what's really lovely about this piece is that, again, we have an example that was a favorite of the Qianlong emperor and his father Yongzheng. And they inscribed, Yongzheng had a stand done that was inscribed, and then the base had been inscribed by the Qianlong emperor. And here's a better shot of it. We'll get to that base in a minute. And when you enlarge these, you take advantage of the enlargements they give you. You really can pull in and see the glaze very, very clearly on these and just how beautifully done they were. You're considering this was done in the 15th century. Lovely, lovely, even glaze, perfect all the way around. The shape is lovely. And then you get over here to the bottom, and here the bottoms of both. On the right, as I mentioned a minute ago, there was an inscription. This was a favorite of the Yongzheng emperor, and on the left, it was a favorite also of the Qianlong emperor. And he inscribed into the bottom of it a poem and a colophon with a couple of seals. And this particular monk's cap was kept in the hall. It was the Harmony, the Hall of Harmony, or the Room of Harmony in the Imperial Palace. It was a favorite in the imperial court, and there's actually a painting of one of the emperor's concubines. I think it's Yongzheng's concubine, in her room or in a study, posing with this particular vase, this exact same vase. It's quite amazing. And here's a good detail of the bottom of the Yongzheng poem. All right, and this was quite a thing, and very, very rare. These do not turn up in auctions or anything like that. This has been in the palace collection forever, and won't likely be turning up at an auction house anytime soon. But spectacular piece of porcelain, beautifully, beautifully glazed, perfect proportions, in pristine condition. And then you toss in a colophon and poems from 2 emperors, and it really makes it an enormous and spectacular rarity. And then we move on to this section where there are 3 really great examples we want to look at. First will be this mallet vase, and then we'll take a look at this piece of Junware here at the end with purple splashes, and then this fascinating pillow. It's an absolutely great thing. And let's start with this. This is that very, very well-known form, Southern Sung Longquan Celadon vase with phoenix handles. These are sometimes referred to as Kinuta green. It's a term that was sort of made popular, I guess, by Japanese collectors. The Japanese loved these pieces, especially during the 19th century, and they collected quite a number of them, and many have come out of Japanese collections. This is one of the finest that made in the Southern Sung. They continued to make these even into the early Ming Dynasty, but the quality wasn't as good, the color wasn't as vibrant, and they weren't as perfect. These are perfect. These are absolutely stunning. And you can come over and you can browse down, and they give you a very nice image of the bottom of these to show you what they look like. And you can see there's a very nice iron oxide line here. The foot is trimmed and it's kept fairly flat and then fully glazed underneath. Okay, and we can move over here and get a better look at it. Here it is. And if you enlarge it and pull it in, you get a true sense of how fine the glaze was on these examples. And considering they were done in the Southern Sung, it's rather miraculous. But the details, the incise decoration with the glaze coated over it, but allowed the high points, the ridges, to push through, giving it detail. It was quite a skill. And you move down the piece, and you don't see many, if hardly any, imperfections at all in the glaze. It's just perfectly even, smooth, and that just elegant tone, that elegant greenish blue tone, just beautifully done. And then the glaze, of course, stops just above the foot in order to prevent it from sticking to anything. But this is truly a great example, really fantastic. And then we're going to hop over and we're going to take a look at the next piece down, which I think we'll do this one. The Jun Ware. It's this Yuan Dynasty. It is a bowl with sky blue glaze, purple splashes, 13th to 14th century. For a long time, many people thought these were all done in the Sung Dynasty, and they've now found that these Jun Ware pieces were done later, mostly heading more closely to the Yuan Dynasty. And one of the reasons they found this out was that they couldn't find any paintings or artwork from the Sung Dynasty that had these in them, but they did appear in the Yuan Dynasty. And there's a nice shot of the interior of it, and here's a picture of the bottom of it. Okay, and they provide a very nice description, and there is an audio narration with this. If you come to the site and you want to over to their site and you want to listen to it, she gives a great description of the piece, the narrator. And we're going to hop over here. Here's the bowl. And if you pull it in and take a good look at it, you can see this beautiful sky blue glaze, and you have these little areas that open up and push through, and where the glaze pulled back around the rim, revealing a bit of the brown body underneath. And you can scroll down and you see how the purple splashes were put on, and they create these sort of almost like little iridescent lines flowing down into this very even purple glaze. These are extremely rare. They make a lot of copies of these. And they made others that were a little bit later that do turn up on the market, but not as quite as fine as this one. This one is technically called a vase. And it's about 7 or so inches tall, and it was fired to have another example inside of it, so they would stack them. This is the interior, and you notice the bottom of the interior is unglazed, and it has this sort of lobed-shaped device with these little spots. And if you remember when we talked about the roux ware, they used little supports to hold pieces up. And they did the same with this. They would put another bowl inside of this bowl during the firing and give it little supports to stand on so that they wouldn't get stuck together and they could be separated once the firing was complete. It's beautifully crackled all the way around, and the blue is really quite lovely. It's a lovely light blue, and it's almost hard to believe they could do it during this time, but they did. And here's a picture of the bottom, the famous base. And here where the light hits the purple, you get a real sense of how beautiful this color was. Just absolutely elegant against the blue background. And there's the foot rim. You notice it's very nicely trimmed, slightly rounded in a few places. It's on a brown body. There's quite a bit of iron in it, in the clay. And they put a little bit of a splash to the interior, and there's that fine dark line right along the edge that separates the splash of the splash of glaze on the inside from the paste. All right, but that's how it should look. Notice how it splays outward slightly. It goes off. And on the outside, again, you see these little edges where the glaze sort of creeped to a standstill when it flowed down the pot while it was being made. Just an absolutely great example. Just absolutely great. And then we're going to move on and we're going to take a look at that. And this is the pillow, the fabulous pillow. And it's also another example. It was inscribed by the Qianlong Emperor. I love this thing. I love it. It's very rustic. It's got a very earthy feel to it. It's sky blue with purple spots on it, done during the Jin to the Yuan Dynasty. There was some overlap when they were making these as far as the style went. And you notice here there are double gourds cut into the body. These are hollow inside, of course, and you have these nice double gourd devices, which is extremely unusual. And here is the bottom. And the bottom, as I mentioned earlier, has the inscription of the Qianlong Emperor added to it. And if you flip over to here, you can pull it in, and you get a good look at the poem and his seals that were added to the bottom of this. This was a favorite of the emperor. He was a big fan of early stuff. You have to keep that in mind always. And he would have things brought to him of the early periods because he was such a fan of the arts. And a lot of the potters during the 18th century seized on that and said, well, we'll make you some things that look like that. And they did reproductions of Sung pieces and other examples just for his own amusement and his enjoyment, because he was a huge supporter of the arts. And here's that beautifully scripted poem cut into the bottom and then colored for to highlight the poem itself. And here's a shot of the one of the double gourds. What's interesting about this, you can pull the picture up, and you can get a real sense of the glaze on this. You notice here this we'll pull it up there, this very thick pooling and dripping. This is thick. This was flowed down, and they managed to stop it from going over the edge. You can see in some areas where the glaze flowed past certain places, very typical of these. But just an elegant ruby head shaped pillow with a marvelous crackle in it. And again, you see where the glaze pulled back from the sharp edge, revealing the underbody, the body of the piece. And here's another image right here. Beautiful shape, nicely done, beautifully glazed with just hints of purple splashes. Just exceptional all the way around. And now we're going to move down the hallway to another section of the museum. And moving along, we come into this part of the museum where they have over here an extraordinary Falun Kai Yongzheng period teapot in overglazed blue enamels and Famille rose enamels. The shape of the pot was because the Emperor Yongzheng liked very simple forms. He liked simple forms with very elegant designs. And this example was based on the shape used in Yixing teapots during the period. It's beautifully done, slightly compressed, and profusely decorated. And there are two poems with seal marks on both sides. And here's a mark, simple four-character mark, overglazed enamel, made in the rate of Yongzheng mark on the bottom, just 4 characters. And if you pull it up, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see, for example, these beautifully done enamels. You can see how the enamels went thick and thin, and just the technical prowess that it takes to do this kind of work here and here. And then the background becomes very three-dimensional, and sometimes they use these little dotty lines just to outline the mountains in the background. And this one has an inscription. It says, "To the south, the trees hug the mountains." And then the red seal on the ends denotes high mountains. And then on the other side is another poem with a similar scene, quite similar. And it also has a poem inscribed into it that says, let's see, I want to get it right. "The mist engulfs the sandbar far to the north." And the seal on the bottom says, "Long rivers." All right. And this was one of Yongzheng's, apparently one of his favorite teapots. It was beautifully done. And as I said, it's got the imperial mark on it, and it's part of the big museum collection. But it's a really, really fine example. They do make copies of these out there, so be careful. There are only a handful of these in the entire world. Yongzheng in particular collected teapots, so it's not a big surprise that this one ended up in the collection. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of more things. Literally around the corner from that amazing little Yongzheng period teapot is this vase. This is a Kangxi example, of course, and it's an extraordinary example. And if we blow it up here it is. They call these Jun vessel with red glaze. And how this color came into be, it was a revival of the color that was done on the Xuande monk's cap that we saw a while ago. And a fellow named Lang Tianji, who was the governor of the Jiangxi province, was ordered by the emperor to go to the kilns in 1705 through about 1712 and supervise the kilns. And one of the things he was tasked with was to create to bring back this beautiful red color. And he was very successful at it. And since then, you hear the term Langyao. They theorize, and they do believe, and I'll take their word for it, that the Lang redware got its name from him, because his first name was Lang. And as I mentioned, the vase form is referred to as a Zun, or Guan Yi's Sun vase, because it's the type of vase that was seen being held by the Buddhist figure Guan Yin. And it's a really great example. And if you come over and you want to pop it open, you get really into the glaze and realize how superbly well done it was. You notice that the color here, it pulls back a little bit, revealing the underbody. And then you slide down it a bit, and you'll notice there are crackles in it. The body is just suffused with lots and lots and lots of bubbles. You can see them all through here, this sea of very soft bubbles, which soften the tone of the glaze itself. And then at the bottom, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And then you have this absolutely precisely ending edge where the red stops and the base begins. And you notice the base is very nicely trimmed, slightly stepped back in Kangxi fashion. They didn't provide a picture of the bottom of this, but I suspect if you were to flip it over, it would probably have a bluish-green Celadon crackle bottom to it. That's what they often have anyway. But this is just a great example, and superbly well done. And it's of nice size. Let's see how big this thing was. Just to be clear, they made them in all sizes. This one was about 8 or 9 inches tall, so it would be the type that you would see being held in a hand, that kind of thing. But just a great all-around example, and very, very rare. But the color is just absolutely radiant. And that concludes our little tour of the National Palace Museum. It's an amazing place. It truly is. And given the circumstances in the world today, nobody will be going there anytime soon because of the coronavirus. So I thought it would be fun to share some of the things that are there. And if you ever get the chance, you ought to go. Have a great week and stay safe, stay inside, do things with your family, and have a lot of fun. Bye-bye.